All right, so are you ready to dive into something really different today? We're going to be exploring the world of Steiner School Teachers, and I know our listeners, you guys are looking for something more than just your average, chalkboard and textbook setup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's so captivating about Steiner education, or as it's sometimes called, Waldorf education.
Mm.
It really flips the script on traditional learning. We're
Mm.
not just talking about, memorizing multiplication tables here. It's about really nurturing a child's imagination, kind of like what they do at the Chicago Waldorf School, where they use, get this, fairy tales to teach math concepts in those early years.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's already kind of blowing my mind. So it's not about just ditching the standard subjects entirely, but sort of approaching them in a way that sparks creativity.
Exactly. I mean, think back to your own time in school. Remember how some lessons felt really dry? Well, Steiner teachers bring this totally different energy to the classroom. Take eurythmy, for example.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's this really unique movement art form where you're using gestures and movement to kind of bring language and music to life. Imagine kids like acting out a poem, but with their whole bodies.
Right.
That's eurythmy. And it's actually like core to Steiner education because it helps kids connect with learning in a really physical and emotional way, something that traditional classrooms often miss.
Wow, it's like stepping into a whole new universe of learning. Now you've provided some fascinating material about what it's actually like to work as a Steiner school teacher. So paint me a picture here. What's that world like?
Okay, so picture classrooms, but they're bathed in natural light, filled with all these natural materials like wood and wool, plants even. It's about creating this sense of warmth and security, very different from the sometimes stark environments you find in conventional schools.
Right, right.
And it's not just about the physical space either. There's this real spirit of collaboration, woven into the fabric of Steiner schools.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, as a teacher, you're not just interacting with students in a bubble. You're part of this tight-knit community, teachers, parents, administrators, all working together to support each child's growth. It's a level of involvement that can be really rewarding for a lot of people, and one of the things that draws a lot of educators to the Steiner approach.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about this creative approach, the unique learning environment. So where does technology fit into all of this? Is it a big part of the Steiner classroom?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot, actually. And, it's fascinating because Steiner education has this very mindful, very deliberate approach to technology.
Okay.
While it's not, entirely absent, the emphasis is really on hands-on experiential learning. Think woodworking, gardening, playing musical instruments, even baking bread.
Right.
These are all activities that really engage the senses and foster a deeper connection to the world.
It's almost like a return to a simpler time, but with this really intentional purpose behind it.
Exactly. It's about giving kids a strong foundation in those essential skills and a connection with the natural world before introducing them to the digital world. And even then, technology is used very selectively, very purposefully. Now, this different approach, this different philosophy, naturally leads us to think about the unique aspects of being a Steiner school teacher.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the pros and cons of taking on this kind of role.
All right, let's unpack that. It sounds incredibly rewarding, but I'm sure it comes with its own unique set of challenges too. So what are we seeing in your research?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest advantages is the holistic approach itself. You're not just delivering a curriculum, you're nurturing the whole child, their creativity, their emotional intelligence, their connection to the world around them. And honestly, a lot of Steiner teachers talk about experiencing this really deep sense of purpose and personal growth in their work, which is amazing.
Wow.
And the smaller class sizes, like those often found at the Detroit Waldorf School, those smaller sizes allow for more individualized attention. And that fosters a strong sense of community within the classroom.
It really does sound like you're stepping into a very, very special kind of role. But you mentioned challenges.
Oh, absolutely. So for one thing, Steiner schools aren't as widespread as traditional schools are. I mean, they just aren't, which means there might be fewer job openings available at any given time. And then there's the salary. Let's be honest, salary can be a deciding factor for a lot of people.
Right.
Salaries in Steiner schools might not be as competitive as those in public or larger private schools.
That makes sense, yeah. Are there any other hurdles that we should be aware of?
Well, becoming a Steiner teacher requires, specialized training, often involving a dedicated program like the one offered at Sunbridge Institute, which is a pretty significant commitment for a lot of people. Plus, you're entering a field that sometimes faces skepticism from those who are really, entrenched in mainstream education. So there's a definite need for advocacy and open-mindedness honestly, on both sides.
That's really fascinating. So it sounds like while the path of a Steiner school teacher might be less conventional, it's definitely one that's filled with purpose and, dare I say it, maybe even a little bit of magic.
You said it. There's a growing movement, towards alternative education. And Steiner education is really, it's at the forefront of all that. Parents are increasingly seeking options beyond the traditional. They're searching for something more holistic and more individualized for their children. Which brings us to a pretty critical question.
And what's that?
What are the specific skills and knowledge that set Steiner teachers apart? What makes them equipped to guide students on this unique educational journey?
Yeah, it really does sound like it takes like a special kind of person to be a Steiner school teacher. So what exactly makes them different from, say, someone who's teaching in a more, traditional public school?
Well, it's definitely not just about knowing the subject matter. Our research highlights a few really crucial skills that really set these teachers apart. Think about it. You're not just lecturing to rows of students. You're creating this really dynamic learning experience that, it engages the senses, emotions, the whole child, really.
Oh, so adaptability is key then.
Oh, absolutely. A Steiner teacher needs to be incredibly flexible with their teaching strategies. Take storytelling, for instance.
Okay.
It's not just for language arts. It's woven into every subject. A Steiner teacher might use a story to introduce a math concept or historical event, and it just brings those subjects to life in a way that really resonates with a child's imagination.
That's such a different way of thinking about teaching. It's almost like being a performer as much as an educator.
Yeah.
What other skills are really important here?
Um, well, coordination's a big one. You're basically orchestrating all these different activities that have to cater to, all these different learning styles.
Right, right.
One day you might be outside leading a nature walk, connecting scientific observation with artistic expression. And then the next day you might be inside guiding students through a woodworking project. And that integrates math and design and these practical skills.
Yeah, yeah.
And through it all, you need this really heightened sense of social perceptiveness, a really deep understanding of each student's individual needs and how they learn best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're not just delivering information, you're really tuning into each student's unique journey. So it sounds like, would you say that Steiner teachers need a deeper understanding of child development, maybe even more so than, say, traditional teachers?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is where Rudolf Steiner's work comes into play.
Rudolf.
Yeah, so he was this Austrian philosopher and educator who developed the whole system of Waldorf education, back in the early 20th century. And he believed in educating what he called the head, heart, and hands, emphasizing this interconnectedness of thinking, feeling, and doing.
Wow, that's really interesting. So Steiner teachers don't just, walk into the classroom knowing this approach, instinctively, right? They have to actually study his philosophy and how it translates to education.
Exactly, yeah. So they really delve into Steiner's writings, and they learn about child development from a Waldorf perspective, and they study the specific methods and curriculum that align with his philosophy. For example, did you know that in a Steiner school, formal academic teaching is often delayed until around age 7?
Really?
Yeah. So those early years are all about, nurturing imagination and creativity through play, storytelling, and these hands-on activities. Steiner really believed that these early experiences lay the foundation for academic learning later on.
That's fascinating. So it's a totally different, timeline for learning compared to the traditional models.
Yeah, you could say that. It really is. It's about meeting the child where they are developmentally and recognizing that, true learning, it happens in stages.
Okay, that makes sense. So we talked about this adaptability, creativity, the deep knowledge of child development. It sounds like being a Steiner teacher, it's almost like a continuous learning experience,
Yeah, you got it. And, that's something that draws a lot of people to this profession. It's not about just following this rigid set of rules. It's about constantly evolving your practice, staying curious, and sort of remaining a student yourself.
Yeah, I can see that being incredibly rewarding for sure. Now, you mentioned something earlier about career stages for Steiner teachers. Can you elaborate on that a little more? What does that journey look like?
Sure. It's kind of like leveling up, just like in those video games you might play. Imagine you're starting out, fresh out of your training program, eager to bring all these new ideas to life. You'd probably begin in more of a supporting role, maybe assisting a more experienced teacher in, say, the younger grades.
Okay, so like an apprenticeship almost.
Exactly, yeah. You're observing, you're learning the rhythms of the Steiner classroom, and you're slowly taking on more responsibility. It's very hands-on. And speaking of hands-on, you might even find yourself building the classroom play structures or like sewing costumes for the school play.
Ah, that's so cool. It sounds like there's a real emphasis on community and collaboration, like right from the start.
Absolutely. And then as you progress through the intermediate stages, you might find yourself leading your own class, developing your own unique lesson plans, and incorporating your personal strengths and passions into your teaching. For example, we read about this one teacher. She discovered a passion for using puppetry to teach history. She was bringing historical figures to life in a way that just captivated her students.
That's incredible. So there's definitely room for individual creativity within the Steiner framework.
Absolutely. It's all about finding your own voice as an educator within this philosophy. And then as you gain experience, you might even take on mentorship roles like, guiding newer teachers or leading professional development workshops.
Okay, so you're not just teaching kids, you're contributing to the field as a whole, which is amazing.
Exactly. It's about sharing your knowledge, inspiring others, and advocating for this, this very unique approach to education. And for some people, this leads to leadership roles within the school, maybe shaping the curriculum or influencing school-wide decisions.
Wow, the possibilities are vast. So we've looked at the specific skills, the career trajectory, but what about the broader picture here? Where does Steiner education fit into the current educational landscape? I mean, it still feels like this best kept secret.
Well, here's the thing. It might not be a secret for much longer.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. Why do you say it might not be a secret for too much longer?
Well, you've seen firsthand how passionate people are about this approach to learning, right?
Right.
It's not this fringe movement anymore. More and more parents are looking for alternatives to conventional education, and Steiner schools are seeing like a surge in popularity.
Really? You're saying there's a growing demand for this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And our sources back this up too. I think there's just this real hunger for education that really nourishes the whole child.
Mm-hmm.
Education that fosters creativity, critical thinking, that connects learning to the real world, And these are things that Steiner education has championed for over a century now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense given everything we've talked about. But do you think, is this interest in Steiner education, is it just a passing trend or is there something more substantial to it?
I really do think it's more than just a trend. I think it speaks to a fundamental shift in how we view education in general.
Okay.
Parents are realizing that, that one-size-fits-all approach, it doesn't work for every child.
Right.
They're looking for learning environments that really honor each child's individuality, that encourage a love of learning, and that really equip children with the skills that they're going to need to thrive in a world that's changing so rapidly.
And Steiner education is uniquely positioned to do that.
I think it is. Just think about it. The emphasis on critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, these are skills that are essential for success, really no matter what path a child chooses in life.
It's almost like Steiner education is preparing kids for a future that, we can't even imagine yet.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And, that brings us back to you, dear listener.
How so?
Well, by, diving deep with us into the world of Steiner School Teachers, you've gone way beyond just exploring, a career path here. You've really tapped into a much larger conversation about, about the very nature of education and its power to shape individuals and ultimately, society as a whole.
Yeah, that's a powerful thought. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about the actual nuts and bolts of the Steiner classroom to the, kind of the philosophical underpinnings of this approach. We've explored the really unique skill set of a Steiner teacher, their career path, the growing demand for this alternative approach to education.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I'm left wondering is,
What's up?
what is the long-term impact of a Steiner education?
Yeah.
How do students who thrive in this environment, how do they compare to their traditionally educated peers later on in life? Do they bring those unique skills and perspectives that they've developed into their careers, into their communities? And I think these are all questions worth, pondering. And, dear listener, maybe they'll even fuel your own personal exploration of education's potential to shape the future.